Hi, my name is Jennifer DeMarco, and you've probably never heard of me. I grew up in the High Point Projects in the 1970s, and I was a teenager in the 1990s. But when I was 10 years old, I wrote a novel, and then I wrote 12 more novels, and 2 films, and a bunch of poetry collections, and I won a ton of awards. And one of my novels went on to sell better than Jurassic Park. Now, I'm not famous like a movie star or even like Stephen King, but my full-time job is just writing stories. I've written more than 100 television episodes, feature films, short films, children's books, and novels. I'm pretty lucky to be able to work at home, and I really love what I do. But I probably wouldn't have been able to do any of that if it weren't for a really great teacher. When I was younger, I was sick a lot, and I missed a lot of school. I was really good at math, but I didn't read at all until I was 9 years old. How could I have studied to be a great writer if I couldn't read great books? If I couldn't study what made those books great? That incredible teacher who knew I was sick a lot, knew I was struggling, who knew I couldn't even read, took me aside and said, "Write the story first and worry about the spelling and the grammar afterward. Just write a story that you love, a story that you find so engaging you could read it again and again and again without getting bored. Just do it. Just make art." Art is anything we create that expresses who we are or how we see the world. Photos, drawings, poems, songs, stories that are made up or real, all of those things are art. And one of the amazing things about art is that it's for everyone, all genders, all ages, all races, sizes, religions, and abilities. Art is subjective. Some people will like it and some people won't. That's why we need so much of it. And that's why we should all try to make art. To help us understand the world, we need to see how all different kinds of people see it. And a great way to do that is through art. We even need to see the way people we disagree with see the world. Washington Students Speak is a book that will collect poems, stories, drawings, photos, and more, all created by students in your classroom. Your teacher or teachers are working with Blue Forge Press, that's the publishing house I volunteer for, to create this amazing collection of your work. I asked 6 of my friends, writers, illustrators, musicians, and more, to come today and help explain the guidelines for each of the different types of art that Washington Students Speak can include. Let's meet them now.
Hey, my name's Cyan Smith.
And I'm Talia McCoy-Redmond. We're sisters.
And we're both members of the Blue Village acting troupe. I recently was in the film Hills Like Elephants.
And we'll both appear in the film A Wash in Blue, coming soon.
But today we want to tell you how to get your photography ready for Washington Students Speak.
Photos in Washington Students Speaks will be printed in black and white. You can take the photo in color, but it won't be in color in the book. If you want to see what it looks like in black and white, apply a black and white filter, or print the photo on a black and white printer.
Your photo needs to be in square or vertical orientation, not landscape or horizontal orientation. Here's the difference.
If you want to become a photojournalist or a studio photographer, you'll need to know about lux, aperture, and shutter speed. But for Washington Student Speaks, you can take your photo with any device, even a phone.
What we don't want is a selfie. We actually can't publish photos of people in the book. Extreme close-ups of hands, eyes, and mouths can be strange and interesting, but if someone can identify who the person is in the photo, we can't publish it.
Challenge yourself to think beyond a selfie. How can you make an ordinary photo extraordinary? What type of photo do you love the most? Animals? Nature's? Building?
What if you took a picture through blades of grass? Change your perspective. Make things more interesting.
No photos should show anything violent, gory, gross, or anything that promotes hate.
Look for beauty and strength in unexpected places. Can your photo bring someone hope? We can't wait to see what you capture.
Hey everyone, I'm Maxwell DeMarco. I'm an eco horror author, the host of an award-winning kids show, and a children's book illustrator. Illustration has always been the art form I felt most connected to. I didn't speak until I was 5 years old, and as someone who lives with autism, I'm a very visual thinker. I also, in general, just like to draw. But you don't have to draw in the traditional sense to have your artwork featured in Washington Students Speak. You can make a collage or a painting, really any medium available to you. Just remember that whatever you create will be published in black and white in the final book. Another thing we can't do that should be obvious is publish artwork with copyrighted characters. So no characters from video games, comics, or films. Or even books, really. Those characters are owned by the creators and studios associated with them. And obviously you can draw them for fun or just to hone your personal skills, but when it comes to publishing something in a book, you need to give us something original. Your artwork should also be created in portrait or vertical orientation, so not landscape or horizontal orientation. Here's the difference. So those are the basic guidelines to make sure that your art fits with the book. You can create whatever you want, be it abstract, realistic, or anywhere in between, but don't create art that's gory, otherwise violent, or in general promotes hate. Besides that, you could create whatever you want, but ultimately it should be something that you're proud of. Consider what emotion or response that your artwork invokes. Is it powerful? What does it say about you and the way you see the world? Take that into consideration, and that will be the artwork that we'll want to publish.
Hi, my name is Dakota Fox, and I'm a poet, an actor, and a memoirist. A memoirist is someone who writes about their life. When you write about something in real life, it's called nonfiction. Nonfiction means the story is real and not made up. You guys probably already know that. What is an event that you want to share with the world? It could be happy, challenging, memorable, or fun. First, you just want to think about what you want to write. It's important to write about our real lives so people like us know that they're not alone. It's also important to write about our real lives so people that are not like us understand us better. You can handwrite or type your story. Just include these following parts. Every story needs a title. After the title, it should say nonfiction, and then it should say your name. Always make sure that these things are at the top of your story. My first memoir was called The Magic and the Nightmare That Was Me. I talked about a lot of difficult things that happened to me in my life, but I also talked about how I grew stronger and how I survived. You can write about a joyful moment, a sad moment, or a challenging moment, but try to find the hope too. After all, you made it here today, and what you learned, you can really help someone else. The most important thing about nonfiction is to be honest, especially about your own feelings. None of us are perfect. Take responsibility for your choices, and someday, I hope to read your story.
My name is Alex Dunn. I am an actor and musician. I am going to talk to you about the guidelines for Washington Students Speak. I was asked to talk to you about poetry because songs, pop songs, ballads, rap, any kind of songs with lyrics are poetry. Most people think that poetry has to rhyme, or that poems have to follow really strict rules like haiku having a certain number of syllables or sonnets having a specific number of lines. But haiku and sonnets are just two types, two genres of poetry, and there are many others. A free verse poem usually doesn't rhyme at all, and narrative poetry rarely even looks like a poem. Ultimately, a poem is just a small story. In a short story or a novel, a writer might share events that take place over a whole month, a year, or even longer. But in a poem, you're just focusing on a small detail or a raw emotion. Some poems are pretty long, even if they do focus on just small details. But for Washington Students Speak, we're looking for poems in this format. Put the title at the top center of your page, then say poetry, and after that, put your name. Skip one line, then start your poem. Your poem can fill the whole page or be just a few lines. A page can fit 30 lines in total. You can write more than that, but then your poem will carry over onto the next page, just so you know. Think about what you want your poem to do. Does it describe something fantastic or weird? Does it explain a moment in your life when you were scared, nervous, or excited? Poems can be fiction or non-fiction. The choice is yours. Anyone can be a poet. Every songwriter is a poet. What makes poetry really good is when you're honest and unfiltered, when you share unique details that other people might not have noticed. Just like with songs, poetry is also a way to build connection, to share things that someone else out there has also experienced like you have. Building connection between people helps us understand one another and work together better. That's a pretty worthy goal.
My name is Carrie Avery Moriarty, and I'm an actor and an author. My most recently published book is Through a Forest of Light and Darkness, and it's fantasy. But I've also written for a horror anthology called Unnerving. Fantasy and horror are two different types of fiction. You guys know that fiction is a story you make up, not something that really happened to you in real life. There are all types of fiction. Mysteries, science fiction, drama, comedies. They all have one thing in common. They're not real. Decide where you want your fictional stories to take place and what type of elements that you'll have. Will you write fantasy with fairies and elves and dragons, or science fiction with rockets and robots and other planets? The different types of fictions are called genres, and you can choose whichever one you'd like. Now, who is the main character in your story? What makes them interesting? Do they look differently than the people around them? Or maybe they think and feel differently. Does your main character discover a truth that no one else believes? Once you know where your story will take place and who your main character is, then you need to decide what your story is going to say. When someone is done reading your story, what do you want them to think? Did you want to just entertain them? Or do you want them to see something in a different way? The greatest power of fiction is, because it isn't real, people will often learn lessons without really knowing it. They don't feel lectured or bossed around. If everything is happening to a robot or a dragon or some other fictional character, but still, they open their minds to new ideas. No matter what you write your fiction story about, make sure to include these things. A title at the top center of the page. After the title, it should say fiction, and then it should have your name. We're looking for original fiction. Please don't write about anything that anybody else has written, books, comics, movies. That's called plagiarism, and we can't do that. We also can't publish stories that are too violent or gory, and we won't publish stories that promote hate. Some people like to say that there are no new stories out there, but that's not entirely true. There are tropes and archetypes, sure, but when you bring yourself to the story, that makes it unique. And that's the part of the story that we want to read.